Into the wild I'll go, and into the wild I am. It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home. Into the wild I'll go, and into the wild I am. It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home.
Welcome to the Freebirth Society podcast. This is a radical space for women who are ready to celebrate their autonomous choices in birth, motherhood, and beyond. Together, we'll learn about wild birth through personal narrative, we'll explore the politics of birth, and we'll analyze everything that relates to our lives as women from a feminist perspective. Here's your host, Emily Saldea.
It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home.
It was following the death of her father that Rebecca got total clarity that it was time to call in her children. Rebecca shares about the harassment she dealt with from the NHS midwives in England and how medical supposed midwifery felt wrong the entire time. She was unnecessarily and unfortunately transferred right before her son emerged, and Rebecca shares how the sabotage of her birth also led to a sabotaged breastfeeding relationship. 4 years later, Rebecca was thrilled to be pregnant again. She connected to the concept of free birth, found this podcast right here, and solidified her truth to birth her way, even in the absence of a supportive partner.
My mothering journey began when my dad died. My dad died when just after I'd finished studying for a master's degree in photography, and he just died very, very suddenly. And I guess it brought back round to me the importance, what did I really want in my life? It kind of, there were so many things that came from him dying, like obviously a lot of grief, but like so many gifts that came from him dying. And one of them was this like massive clarity. I really want to have children. Like the time is now. I don't want to wait. And I guess there was always like that thing, and this is probably quite common of people in their 30s. Oh, I do really want to have children, but at some point, and I'm working at the moment, and some point I'll do it. I did have a partner at the time, but he was younger, and he kind of just wasn't there yet. But my dad dying kind of brought this clarity of like, I really, really want to have children, and I don't want to wait. And I guess I can't remember how old I was then, maybe like 33. So, I said this to my partner at the time, and we were kind of a little bit rocky, and he just was like, I'm just not ready. So after a while, we ended up going our separate ways. At that time, I also just happened to finish like a really big job. I'm a photographer, and I just finished helping doing a film. And I was really burnt out, and I decided to just move house and go and live in a totally different part of the country and go and be with my sister and look after her children. So I just kind of ditched everything, became a waitress, and I'm a childcare person, and went to live by the sea, basically. And I was single, and didn't know what would happen. It was just like a whole new life, basically. Now, as it happened in that summer, my partner came back to me and had time to think, and was just like, actually, I do really want to be with you, and I do want to have children with you. So we got back together, And I clearly remember thinking like, this is like a really big part of my life. Like I can see that this is going to define like the next part of my life, like the choice that I make here. Should we move forward with this, or am I going to stay single and see what the future lies? But in the end, I was like, the draw of kind of having children and that ideal, and that we would be back together and, live happily ever after was like a nice idea, a really good idea. So we got back together. And at the end of that summer, I was pregnant, which was amazing. And I was like really happy. But strangely, I wasn't really sure exactly how he was going to take it. But and as it happened, he then kind of doubled back and was completely freaked out. But I think that's because we were kind of like remembering the reality of our relationship, and we're a little bit rocky again. And we were like, oh, maybe we shouldn't go forward after all. But there I was pregnant, and I was absolutely delighted. I knew that I was just really happy, and this is what was happening, no matter what, basically. So we went through a really hard time, actually, at the beginning of my pregnancy. But in a way, it was beautiful for me because I was in Cornwall by the sea, and I spent the first 3 months just on my own down there, living in a shared house, just being in the elements, walking in nature, swimming, just being very free. I didn't see a midwife at all during those first 3 months. But then I kind of was like, well, my partner was in Bristol, which is further up country, and I had a lot of friends up there, and I just kind of felt, well, perhaps it'd be nice to be up there again where I'd come from, in a good network of women and lots of things that I could tap into. So I made a decision to move back up there near him as well, near my partner. And, he was still kind of very scared. He was scared of, I'm not sure, just like the unknown of it all.
Sure.
Really.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah. And I think the reality of like coming back to me and saying, I do really want to have children with you, but then actually the reality of me being pregnant and what that actually meant was kind of, it was kind of, it was different for him. He had a lot of things to sort of, to face, I suppose, to grow into. So we had a lot of conflicts in the beginning of my first pregnancy. And that was really, really difficult. We saw a counsellor, and we didn't live together for a long time. And I made a choice I had one scan in that pregnancy.
Did you know anyone who had kind of taken this hands-off approach? And also, what was your plan in terms of how you were arranging your birth?
Yeah, it was a good question. I kind of didn't want to go into the system, really. I'd photographed a woman a few years before when I was working in London, and it was quite a funny story. She was a raw food kind of advocate, and she'd lost like a whole ton of weight by eating raw food. And for some reason, I'd stayed on her email list, so I'd photographed her for a magazine, and I got her like raw food update things. And in one of them was a video of her saying how she'd moved to Ecuador and how she'd birthed like autonomously. And I was like, oh, wow, that's like so interesting. And I was like watching loads of different things like that and reading lots of different books. And I ordered like the unassisted birth book, and a few others that were not the normal kind of birth books. And I was like really not normal, but like more mainstream birth books. And I was really inspired by like the idea that somebody would give birth without kind of being in the medical system. But I didn't really know I don't know, like I had that in my mind. I was like, yeah, I want to do that. But then I came back to the city and to my partner, and, you know, I've got two sisters who both have families, and my mom was kind of like, oh, you know, you need to go and have the scans, and, you know, she was worried about Down syndrome and all of these things because, you know, we've got somebody in the family who has Down syndrome, and she was kind of like, you know, you need to check that out. And I felt pressure, as many women do, around those kind of things. So I did have the one scan, and I guess like once I was in the system, that set the ball rolling, like the tone.
Yeah.
Even though I had this like really beautiful idea, like I had like a lot of resistance from my partner because we weren't even living together. He was like worried about me not having a scan, you know, through fear and the unknown. You know, and that was different. I guess not many people know that many people that go down that route. Like It's not very common. I certainly didn't know anyone apart from my eldest sister. So I kind of drew on her knowledge, but it's kind of a lonely place to be when there's only really one person and that person lives miles away. And so once I'd kind of gone to see the midwife, they were like, oh, you know, I haven't been to see anyone for 3 months. Like, I was kind of like, well, I feel fine, so it's not really an issue to me. And I was quite shocked that they were like a bit kind of, you know, uppity about it. And I just felt really, every time I went for the appointments, I was just like, this is really weird. Like, it's just, no one's really caring. Like, it just felt so clinical. And I refused lots of the tests, which they didn't really like, and kept pressurizing me to do them. And then when I was like, I'm only going to have one scan, they were like, oh, that's strange. And they gave me a midwife who I didn't like, and I didn't want to see her. So I tried to change practices. And then when I did that, I got a call from like the head midwife from the hospitals, you know, kind of, she was a bit jumpy, I think, saying, you know, why do you feel like you need to change? And I explained that I didn't really feel like they were supporting me in a home, because I wanted a home birth. So yeah, and I just remember just every time I was in the room with them, it was kind of, you know, there just wasn't really, I just didn't really feel any alignment with any of these women. Yeah. I was like, well, how am I gonna, it just felt really strange. Like, I don't even know these people.
It is strange. Yeah. Good point. So it is totally weird. You don't like know these people, and you're just kind of thrust into this relationship that's kind of awkward and predicated on your subordination.
Yeah. And they were, and not only that, they were like, you know, they said to me, and this is just obvious, yeah, so whoever you're seeing in the clinic isn't necessarily going to be the person that comes to your birth anyway. So that was always just like, oh my God, like, that's just so weird. So I can spend all this time going to all these people, and then a complete stranger is going to turn up in my house. So, you know, kind of time went on, I was getting nearer to the end of my pregnancy, and I refused like lots of different things. And I felt like they were getting a bit jumpy around me. It felt like I'd like given them these red flags about me, which is probably totally in my head, but I obviously wasn't following the natural progression. And so at 34 weeks, I went to have a fundal height measuring, or that was part of my assessment, you know, when I go for your midwife appointment. And they measured me with the tape measure. And they came back to me later and said, oh, you know, you're measuring small. And I was like, okay. And they said, oh, we want you to go and have a growth scan. And I was like, well, no, because I refused the second scan. And so I don't want to go and have a growth scan. Because they were saying, well, it's fine if you have a growth scan and it's all fine, then you can go ahead with your home birth. But if it's not, then we'll have to kind of think again, basically. And I was like, well, yeah, so I really don't want to go for the growth scan. I feel fine. Everything feels fine. I don't feel the baby feels fine. The heartbeat's fine. There's nothing. I didn't really feel there was anything for me to worry about. I felt really healthy. I was walking every day. I was looking after myself. I'd had loads of, shiatsu along the way. I was seeing alternative practitioners, all the way along to kind of give me the support that I wasn't getting at the midwives.
Right.
So I just felt like that everything was fine. And then I said this to the midwife that had been assigned to me, and they gave me one in the end that I would keep seeing, because I think they felt like I was jumpy, which I was, because I was like, I just don't want to keep seeing all these different people. And so she came, I spoke to her, and she basically was saying that, this could, there's risks, basically, that this could be a risk to your baby, that you're measuring small, that the placenta might not be feeding the baby properly, and that there's risks to do with that.
It's just so bonkers, because everybody knows that measuring and ultrasounds are don't improve outcomes. Like measuring is a facade. It's not evidence based. And yes, It's possible what they just said, right? It's always possible. We could come up with a lot of things that are possible, but with a healthy mother who feels good, to then like gaslight you, and act like you don't know what you're feeling or thinking, and that we need to use a non-evidence-based piece of technology that actually has been proven to harm fetal tissue, therefore our babies, on you. It's just madness, man.
Yeah, and exactly. And I'd specifically declined the second one because of those reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, well, I'm not going to do this. And also I knew someone else who'd had to go in and have repeated scans like every couple of days.
Of course.
And I was like, I am not subjecting myself to that 34 weeks. There's just no way. I was just like, I'm just going to stay away.
It's also just so bonkers that this isn't like, I'm just such a broken record, but like, this is a business that we opt into. Like, it should be on our terms. It's a product. These are services. A massage therapist isn't telling you how many massages you need, or whatever. Your mechanic doesn't tell you, what to do. Like, these are services that you are opting into, and it's so distorted and obviously not experienced that way. But I can't help but fantasize what it would feel like, right? If these services were just available for us. But of course, the little lady can't decide for herself, right?
No,
we couldn't possibly know that we need scans or anything.
I know, it really felt like that. And then what happened was I had the head midwife of the hospital. So you have to allocate the hospital that you're going to go to. And so that I had the head midwife call me at 34 weeks and reiterate what the midwife, my local midwife, had told me. Basically, it was like about an hour-long conversation of her telling me that if I didn't do this, my baby might die.
Mm-hmm.
And like, for me, it just felt like, I just don't know why you're calling me. Like, I'm 34 weeks pregnant, and you're ringing me to tell me that my baby might die. Like, how is that caring for me? And also, like, ringing me up, like, at least ask me to come into an office. Do you know what I mean? Like, ringing me on the phone where I've got no, like, opt out in a way. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it felt so unprofessional to me, actually, that she
but
did that.
NHS does this. I mean, I've even had many women on the podcast specifically that have told me about the harassment of NHS and having the midwives harass them in their homes and show up at their homes. I mean, it's nuts.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, fine. I'll think about what you've said. And then she followed that up with an email, then reiterating everything that she'd said, and just telling me that all these clinical trials that had been done, that this was the reason that that I needed to be worried, basically, and they needed to have a growth scan for reassurance, although it was my choice if I did it or not. Do you know what I mean? But she was very clear, that there could be poor outcomes, severe brain injury, breathing difficulties, or death of the baby. And I was like, okay, this is really helpful at 34 weeks. Do you know what I mean? To be putting these ideas into, a woman who's about to give birth.
To scare you into compliance.
Yeah. She said, one of the things that I deeply remember was, and I printed off the letter recently, just to have another look at it, because I just wanted to remind myself, because there was a partner that just was saying, the studies have shown that 45% of low-risk first-time mums who attempt home birth or birth in a midwife-led unit develop a complication during or shortly after labour, which requires transfer into an obstetric unit. In the event of transfer, the potential for harm to you or your baby is increased due to the inevitable delay in reaching help. I was just like, who attempt home birth? Yeah. I was just like, that for me was like the most patronising thing that I could have written, basically. And I can, in some ways, understand their point of view, because they didn't have much to go on. I'd only had one scan, so I can see that they were worried and that I wasn't ticking any of their boxes.
Well, you're a walking liability.
Yeah.
But Rebecca, you would have been, even if you had complied with everything, because that's how women are treated. Even if they had all the fake information at their fingertips, you are still a disaster waiting to happen. And they still need to save your baby from your broken body. That's just how it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, nothing to do with the fact that I'm a small person, my partner's small, the women in my family are not big. I don't know. It was a lot at 34 weeks. There's a lot to deal with. So then I was just like, okay, well, I'm not doing it. So that was that. I carried on. And then I went, the last few weeks were fine. I'd made a birth plan. I was going to birth at home. I had my pool. Everything was ready. I remember I lost my kind of mucus plug, I think on the Tuesday. Not much happened until the next day, the Wednesday. And what happened then?
Wait, hold on. Sorry. Did you go get the scan?
No, I didn't do the scan.
Damn, you held strong.
No, I didn't. Yeah, I didn't. I was like, no, I'm not doing it, because I just didn't want to be at the mercy of having to go in every other day.
Yeah.
And I just felt like I just could see how easily it could kind of come out of my grasp where I was. Do you know what I mean? Because I was so close to the end. I could see that one thing could lead to another really easily. And like I said, I felt totally fine. Everything to me was fine. I felt good. I felt healthy. I felt happy. The baby, for me, felt happy. So that I kind of stayed with that, really. So kind of coming towards the end, I remember like I said, I lost. It started on the Tuesday, and nothing big was happening. I lost my mucus plug, and then not a huge amount happened. I could feel some sensations, and I think I went to bed that night thinking, oh, something happened. But I think that first night, not much had happened. And then the next morning, things started to be a bit stronger. So I was just at home. I didn't ring anyone. I had a doula. She didn't come for a while. And I don't know I can't remember if she came that first night, but then I was up all night on the Wednesday night, just walking around, walking. Like I thought, okay, I'm in labor, because I was just having like these repeated surgy pains. I couldn't sit down or lie down for any length of time. So I just literally just been up all night. So I was really tired the next day. And we got the lady who'd been doing shiatsu. She came over and kind of gave me treatment because I just felt like I was like up in the sky. Like I was like, whew, like way up there, like just did not know what was going on.
Yeah.
So she kind of grounded me a little bit, but then this continued on for the whole of the next day. And then that night, I was just like, I just don't know what is going on. Like, what is going on? Am I like, is this labor? I've been already like so long. It felt like, a whole day and a night. I was like, what is going on? So the midwife came. I think, I can't remember, I called the midwife, and it wasn't the midwife I'd been seeing at the clinic. It was a totally different midwife. That midwife had gone on holiday, which she had warned me might happen. So I never met before. And I was just like, I just don't know what's going on. I've got no idea what's going on with this. She said, well, I can give you an exam, an examination, an internal examination. And I was like, yeah, okay, fine. Because it was so painful. It was just, these surges were so painful. Like I just didn't know what was going on. And she just said, yeah, you're not in labor. I was like, what? What do you mean? She said, I think your baby seems to be back to back. And I was like, what do you mean I'm not in labor? Like I've just been like up for a whole night and a whole day, like with this pain. And what, I'm not in labor? Like, I remember like so clearly, like, what? What does that mean then?
Brutal.
So then I was up. She left, and then I didn't see anyone again. That whole night I was up again. So this was 2 nights in a row I'd been up, and I was just walking around. I remember kind of saying to the doula, like, is this normal? Like, what is going on? Like, what is going on? Have you heard of people being like this long? And she was just like, no. Anyway, so up a whole nother night, basically, in this excruciating pain. And this pain was like pushing my hips forward and then pushing my bum back. And all I could do is walk. All I could do is walk around the house, just walk around the house. Like, I was so tired. And the next morning I was just like, I so done. Like Mike had been up with me loads, but then he would be crashed out. And I was just like, oh my God, I'm just so tired. I just don't know what to do. And then partway through that day, I was, then I had another load of midwives came, and they were like, looking at me. It's so hazy because I was in such a different place. But then partway through that day, I was like violently like sick, and my waters broke. So
good.
So that was good. And I was in the bathroom, but the midwife was kind of like coming in to monitor the heartbeat all the time. And then, I had the lady who'd done shiatsu was over again, because I was just like, somebody, I need help. And Mike had called her and she came. So I had like quite a few people in my house. Yeah. And basically my labor stalled. I mean, unsurprisingly, what I know now, but at the time I was just like, oh, this can't be. So I just just by this time I was just like so fed up with kind of people meddling with me, because she'd been like, she was doing the heartbeat, but then she wouldn't say anything. She would do it and then she was silent. So I was just like, well, what's going on? Like, and then she was like, oh yeah, you're not really that dilated. And so it was just like this thing, this first midwife told me I wasn't even later than this one was like, oh, you're only this much. And I was so disheartened. I was like, so disheartened. So time went on. I basically completely stalled. I was really pissed off by this point. And I was just like, I said to Mike, I just want them all to get the fuck out of my house. Get them out of my house. I don't want them here. Just get everybody away. Get them away. So I just kind of like walked around twiddling my nipples upstairs, just singing to the baby, like, it's okay, it's time to come out, you know, everything's fine, it's all going to be good, we're so excited to meet you. I kind of just went on like this. And after a while, I got myself back in labour. I mean, I say I got myself back in labour. Either way, like it just, you know, I was relaxed enough for it to come back because I was on my own again.
I'm kind of shocked they didn't transfer you.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. And then the midwives changed shift again. So then I had some more midwives come, and I think the doula got quite jumpy at this point because I told everyone to go away, and she was like a bit freaked out, and because she could maybe hear me going back into labour, and she thought, I don't exactly know what happened, because at this point I was like 2 days, you know, and 2 nights in, I was just completely like out of it, exhausted. And then I was just with Mike, and I was just kind of singing a bit. And then another midwife came into my room and sat in the corner, and she was actually amazing. She sat in the corner, she didn't look at me at all. She was rubbing my leg. She was really encouraging. So nice. I remember her name was Ali. She was really, really nice. But by that point, I think I was just so exhausted. I couldn't do anything, basically. It was just like, it was there. It was all coming, but there was no oomph, you know, there was nothing left in me. So then there was another midwife out the door taking the heart rate details. And then the head midwife from the hospital came to my house. And the old midwives hadn't left yet. I don't know how this happened. So basically then I had 5 midwives in my house, including the midwife from the hospital.
Come on.
And then I remember like a lot of them, like maybe 3 of them in my room, and then saying, just put your leg up on there and just try this. And if that doesn't work, we're going to have to transfer you. So after a while, they were like, yeah, we're just going to, like, we'd like you to come in and come on a drip. And I was like, I need you to all leave the room, and I'm going to make a decision. And so I said to my partner, I said, do you know what? I'm just so done. I'm so tired. Yeah. I just can't. So I went in an ambulance there to the hospital. It was a very short journey away. They took me in. I think I was extremely lucky that I had a midwife on duty, and she just kind of looked at me, and she just said to me, do you know what? You're just so close. Like, just listen to my voice and nobody else's voice, and just, that's it. And she kind of taught me through. She drained my bladder. I was on my back, which was really difficult at that point. But I actually don't think I could have done anything different because I was so unbelievably tired. I think they gave me a can of Coke as well to like give me some energy. And then I just remembered like having to push, like, and yeah, eventually he just came out after a lot of pain. And
so how long were you there at the hospital?
Hour.
Wow.
Yeah, so he was born.
My God, you were so close.
So yeah, he was born at 10 p.m. that night, so it was a long time. So I was really pleased because nothing had happened. I hadn't had anything. So I'd had the natural birth that I wanted, but obviously not in the location I wanted. They whisked him. They cut the cord really quickly. They whisked him onto some oxygen, and then they gave him back to me. Yeah, and I stayed for a while, but then they basically said that my partner couldn't stay and the baby, and that he couldn't be with me. He had to be in a crib. So I decided to leave hospital that night, and we just went home. We all went home.
Good.
So yeah, that was
wow. How does that all like leave you in that first year?
I had a really terrible postpartum. I couldn't breastfeed. I really struggled for 3 months to breastfeed. I had kind of like the first 10 days of just terrible feeding, basically, and was so scared to kind of get proper help. In the end, I had to go back into hospital with my son, and to have some bottles and pumping and all sorts. Yeah, so yeah, it left me with a lot of sadness and wishing
that's
I
a big deal.
could have changed it. Really, it took me a long time to get over it. Basically,
yeah, of course.
Yeah, it was just a real fight. I think real fight, even postpartum. The first 3 months was just really, really, really hard. And I think it was, is it Sarah Jane Buckley talks about the hormonal pathways. Is that the right word?
Yeah, the hormonal blueprint.
And I can now I know what I know now. I realized that was just all so interrupted. So it's not really surprising that the breastfeeding was so hard. It took me a long time to get pregnant again. I had a miscarriage in between. And then I got pregnant again 4 years later, in total after my son, with a miscarriage in between. And I was, delighted, just really delighted. I was 42, 41. And I kind of just didn't really know. I knew that I was not going to do it the way I'd done it the first time. But I didn't really know, am I just going to get an independent midwife? And just completely, I knew that I knew at the very least I was getting an independent midwife. I was never going to go back into the system. That was absolutely out of the question. I was not going to do that again. Absolutely not. I still hadn't really decided what I was going to do. And this was 6 months in. And I was at something with my son, and I sort of randomly met this woman at this sort of home education thing, because I home educate my son, and I was asking about doulas, and she told me of a local doula, and I thought, oh, maybe it's good to know somebody local, and just chat to them. Just to see, is this the way I'm going to go? And so I got in contact with this woman. I emailed her and I was like, oh, I hear you're local. I'd really like to just come and chat to you. And she messaged me back and she said, yeah, I'm a doula. I actually free-birthed my child. And I was like, oh, wow. And straight away I was like, that's what I'm going to do.
Had you heard about it before?
Well, like I'd said, with my first birth, I'd heard of this woman in Ecuador that had done it. So it was just almost like this looping back. That, of course, that's what I wanted to do the first time. And I was like, yeah, totally. I want to do this. So I met with her. She was really kind. I met with her quite a few times to talk over how she'd done it. She told me about you guys, about Freebirth Society. And I kind of tapped into that and started listening. She told me about the podcast and I started listening to all the stories, which was just amazing. The more I listened and the more I kind of went and chatted to her about her free birth, the more I was cementing it all in my mind. Yeah, this is what I'm going to do, basically. So I in my second trimester, I still hadn't seen anyone, hadn't had any testing or been to a medical person at all. And I thought, well, maybe I'll meet with a midwife just to keep my options open. And because my partner and I had kind of talked about that. and to kind of talk about my fears, which I did. And it was really great to go through some things with her. But in the end, I was like, no, I'm gonna free birth.
And was it an NHS or an independent?
No, it's an independent. Yeah. So my partner at this point was like, oh yeah. So I was the midwife. And I was like, yeah, let's see how it goes. I haven't quite decided, and I'm going to meet with the doula again. And yeah. And sort of that's how far we'd gone with that, really. But then one evening we were kind of having a chat, and he was like, so what are you going to do? It's like, we're at 6 months. And I was like, well, yeah, there's some options I could kind of think about doing on my own. He was like, yeah, like what, like totally on your own? And I was like, well, there's a possibility. And he was very shocked. And I think he was, well, looking back now, I can see that he was very, very scared. But kind of in the conversation, how it happened, it was more kind of, the fear kind of came out a bit more aggressively, I suppose. So we kind of had this sort of like confrontation over it. And I was like, well, yeah, well, I think I could do this. And because I guess he'd kind of come at this from like behind where I was at, and I had a lot of information. I'd been mulling it over a long time. He was really, really fearful. And yeah, basically he was just saying to me, if anything was to go wrong, then, I wouldn't be able to not blame you, essentially, because yeah, just kind of, I guess he just felt like, how could he shoulder that responsibility, because it felt like he wouldn't be part of that decision.
Wow, so yeah, that's a really big deal.
It was a big statement. Yeah, it was a really big statement. Like, if something goes wrong, I'm going to blame you. I think, knowing kind of what we know now, and, time, is an amazing healer, isn't it? And, he was just very, very scared and just didn't really know what that meant. And hadn't, ever encountered it. So it was, a huge deal for him.
So how does that look for the rest of your pregnancy? Like, do you kind of keep it pretty nonchalant, or are you like, I'm free birthing, deal with it? Or like, how does it, because it sounds like you knew that this was what you were going to do.
Yeah, I knew. I kept it. I saw the midwife again, but mainly to kind of talk through fears again, and to kind of do some, I've forgotten the word. Anyway, we basically couldn't speak about it because it was too emotive. It was too, we were really kind of coming up against each other. And I just was like, I just don't want to have this kind of like argument about it when I'm this pregnant. I just was like, I can't go into it. I can't go there. So I didn't. Basically, I just kind of carried on my planning. I think I saw the doula a couple of times just to chat through, we were just like regular chatting, like, how she dealt with, bits and pieces of the free birth. And it was really good to have that perspective. And I also decided quite late on, I think I had like a month or month and a half to go, that I would enroll on the free birth course. So I sat up like in the nights when I was awake, which was often, with like pregnancy insomnia. And I just like did all my reading at that time in the middle of the night, like 3 a.m. I would get up and do my reading at the course, which was really comforting. And
were you purposely kind of keeping that secretive?
No, we just couldn't really go there together.
So did he drop it?
Yeah, he dropped it. because we'd had like a pretty big argument over it, like really quite full on, where we'd both got really, really intensely upset. And I just was like, I just don't want to put myself in that position. Like, I don't want to raise my my level of anxiousness or upset over this. I just kind of was just like, this is what I'm doing, basically. So this is what is going to happen. And that's it. I remember the word with the midwife. We'd done like a family constellation where you kind of pick you work through a scenario, but without the other person there. So we'd done that. And so I kind of had worked through it in my own way. And I'd called upon this ancestor to be with me, and kind of spoken to Mike's ancestor. And I know that sounds really funny, but it was just like this way of connecting in with each other and looking at where he was at from a different point of view, and where,
sounds cool.
It was amazing, actually, and it was really helpful. And that kind of led me through knowing that this would turn around, and that I just needed to stay strong. And so I did. Yeah, that's what I did. I just decided, well, this is what's happening. And we moved further through to the end, and we talked about me doing a plan, and I wrote that out one night and gave that to him, which was kind of exactly how I wanted everything to be, basically. And the last while, we were so much more aligned, and he was really supportive and was with me. And
that's great.
Once he'd read like through the birth, through my plan and how I really wanted it to be, I think he felt more in the know as well. Like, yeah.
And I think this is important, I think, to highlight, because from where I sit, what I see very frequently is women unsupported in their desire to free birth, and then because they're unsupported by their scared husbands, they stop. That's the thing that then is missing, and they hire the midwife. They go to the hospital. And so what this story highlights, which I've seen so consistently with free birthers, is they want a free birth. Husband doesn't support them. They say, I'm doing it anyway. You need to get on board because this is happening. And then they do. And they get on board. And it's not without tension. It's not without conflict. It's not without breaking through some old threads of the relationship, right? Because for many women, this will be the first time in her marriage that she has really staked a claim. And so it can be incredibly confronting to the old paradigm of their relationship. But, like your story and so many that I know, it follows that formula. It's like, first the partner's like, hell no, and there's some scary stuff there. There's some drama, there's some fighting. And if the woman is truly committed, like you, it was like, it's going to happen either way, but I want the support. Duh. We all want the support. And in fact, it is going to be damaging to our marriage if I don't have it. Like, let's be real. If you don't get on board with this, like, there will be a fracture of trust that occurs, right? Because this is so important. And so I'm very happy to hear that he figured that out. And I guess I'm just saying to any listeners, like, if this is your first time considering free birth, and obviously you can't make a broad statement like this, but I have seen this pattern play out a lot, where once the woman fully commits and is like, it's happening, you need to get on board with me. It happens very, 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 very often. Not always, obviously, but I guess all of that rambling is to really say, like, you got to do you, and you got to follow what's right for you and your baby. And if we're asking for permission and waiting around on our fearful husband's support, we can really sabotage, what's here for us.
Yeah. And I was like, I'm just doing this. I'm absolutely doing this. And like you say, it would have been really foolish of him to go against me, because that would have been a massive thing.
Oh my God.
Just huge. So, I was really grateful that he came around in a good way. And we had a really good last few weeks, actually, really beautiful time. Feeling like, very close, and we really worked hard to kind of, be one towards the end. And I think kind of writing out everything that I really wanted was really helpful for him.
Yeah, helped him picture it.
Helped him really see in words exactly what I wanted, rather than just kind of like me having a lot of this information that I'd read and known and intrinsically felt, and him, so I think it's very easy for us to kind of know that, but then like he needed it in black and white, because there was so much more that he needed to know. So what happened? Right, I was about roughly 40 weeks. My waters broke. It was very early in the morning, around 6 a.m. And I just felt a pop. I kind of, but it wasn't much. It wasn't like a big gush. So I was kind of still very sleepy. My son was in the bed with me, and I was like, okay, I think I walked to the bathroom, just kind of checked it out. It was just like this leaking feeling. So I didn't really pay a huge amount of attention to it. That day, that kind of carried on happening. It wasn't a lot, but it was, it was like I would say it's like a leaking. So I was like, this started me off on this kind of situation. I was like, what is going on? And then I was like trying to work out, what happens if your waters don't properly break? What does this mean, kind of thing? So I went on this search to sort of see what that meant. And I kind of was like, okay, well, I just need to rest. So I tried to rest, but I was really restless and was really fighting the rest. Because the more I rested, the more I was kind of like, my mind was starting to kind of go into, kind of a negative space. Because nothing was really happening. There was just this leaking. And so, I sort of rested a bit that day. By the evening, I was pretty restless. And then I went to sleep. The next morning, nothing. And then all that day, I was like, oh, okay, everything's there. You just must rest. But I was still like, but I just feel so weird resting. And so by that evening, I decided I'm just going to go for a walk. But by that, I was starting then to have some intense kind of feelings. So much that I didn't want to kind of go for a long walk, but I kind of wanted to get out. And I went and sat under sort of a favourite tree that I went to a lot when I was pregnant, and was just kind of, thinking, what's going on here? But the more I just couldn't relax, basically. My mind started to go. I started to go into this really dark place of like, but, what if nothing happens now and I have to go to hospital? It's like this spiral downwards basically was starting to come, and no amount of me trying to kind of keep out of it was happening. And I was fixated on the fact that, okay, I need to rest, because I'd had such a long first birth. I was like, in my mind, I was like, I cannot think that I'm going to have a short birth, because it was just like, like 50 hours or something with my first one. I was like, there's no way that I can think that this is going to be short. So I'd started to basically freak out. This happened. My son went to bed, and it was kind of evening time, and I was properly like getting stressed, thinking, oh, well, maybe I should go to the hospital, maybe I should get tricked out, but I haven't seen anyone the whole of my pregnancy. Nobody's seen me. If I go to hospital, like, what am I going to do? What is that going to contend with? That's going to open up this massive can of worms. So I started to go on this vibe, basically, which I knew was not a good place to be going, but I literally could not stop my mind. So I rang the doula that I'd been in touch with, and I was like, I'm just going crazy. My waters are broken, but nothing's really happening. And she said, well, look, I know someone, another doula, she's Spanish. I know that her waters broke like on the Wednesday and she didn't have her baby till like the following Friday. I could give you her number. So I was like, okay, yeah, anything. So we eventually spoke after like quite a few hours of me like spinning around in my head. And she just said to me, she said, tell me the whole story. And I knew she'd free birth as well. So it was like, I felt like it was she was a nice person. I felt like aligned with her. So we had a little brief chat, not long. And at the end of it, she just said, well, it just seems to me that you're in labor. And I was like, it was like this light going on. I was like, oh yeah, like, I'm in labor. But because I had nobody here, it was just me going through this. I hadn't really told anybody else that I was free birthing. I didn't have any female friends that could come. I didn't really feel my family. I didn't even tell my family I wasn't having a midwife because I just didn't want to take on their fear at all. I just felt that was the best protection for me. So I was just alone, basically. So her just saying to me, you're in labor. I don't know why. It just flipped my whole head. And I just, from that point onwards, I was fine. She just said, just repeat to yourself, I'm in labor. And isn't this great? Or something really positive like that, just something really short. And then all the fear just disappeared. It was just gone.
That's so
and
sweet.
It was amazing. Yeah,
Magic of women, huh?
It was just amazing. This person I've never met in a totally different country, never spoken to before. And she just said, the right thing at the right time, which could have been completely the opposite scenario as well. When you reach out for help, it could have, it could have been much worse, but could have taken me down a different road, but it didn't anyway. So from that point onwards, all night, and I realized that I had really been having a lot of waves, but I hadn't really thought that I had because I hadn't properly, my waters hadn't properly broken. So all night I was on my own, basically, in the dark, completely dark. I tried to kind of put some candles on, but the flickering was just annoyed me so much. I was just completely in the dark all night long by myself. And all the time through my pregnancy, I was like, I really want to be like mostly giving birth at night. I really don't want my whole family to be awake because my son was going to be here. I just kind of visualized this whole nighttime birthing. And it was really like that all night long. And then everybody woke up at like between 6 and 7. And like, I was, fully moving forward. I was in quite deep by that point. Things were quite close together. I hadn't slept all night. I was feeling like this very intense feelings. I really wanted to get in a pool, but I just didn't really know how to really reach out and get my partner to fill it up. So I kind of went in the shower a little bit. My son came in my room, was sort of clambering over me a little bit. And I was just like, oh God. He was very sweet though. He was like, squeeze my hand, mummy, if it hurts. It's just been like, I remember like little flashes of that. And then also seeing my 2 cats just asleep, snuggled up the whole time, just thinking, oh, I can't believe you look so peaceful and happy. And here I am at the end of the bed. So all this kind of craziness was going on, getting my son up and breakfasted and everything. And it all the while getting more and more tense. It was probably around 9 a.m. or something. I was in and out of the shower and it was like, I really want my pool up. And my partner was like, okay, I'll go off and do it. And he went off for like, what's it like? I was like, where is he? What is he doing? So I was just still on my own, basically. And then my son was like, I'm going next door to my next door to the neighbours. And I was like, great. And things are feeling like fairly intense by this point. And he left and I went into the other room, which had a futon on the floor because I'd been standing up the whole night, just grabbing onto the end of the bed, like feeling this surge going right through me. So I just instinctively kind of just went into the front room, went on all fours on the futon and I basically like called for my partner. I then projectile vomited loads and my actual waters, like my hind waters then broke like massively at the same time as projectile vomiting. It was just a complete mess. And then my I was like, I want the pool. He was like, should I go and do it? And I was like, no, it's no time. He was kind of trying to leave. I was like, don't leave me. And I was just like squeezing his hand really hard. And then I was like, well, but why am I feeling like this pushing? This is like, what's going on? Because I was thinking, surely it needs to be longer. Like, it needs to be longer? Because time is just so strange, isn't it, when you're in that zone? But she was basically coming, and that was that. And she just was like, I'm coming. And so I kind of felt this real pushing. And I guess that was probably for about 20 minutes. It wasn't total pushing, but it was really, really fiery and intense. And I remember like my partner was kind of near my head, like, and he was breathing on me, and I was like, don't fucking breathe on me. Like, just properly shouting at me. And then he was like, at one point he went around the back and he was like, oh my God. I was like, don't go up, don't look at me. Like, properly shouting, getting all the aggression out of my pregnancy, obviously. And then she literally came within 20 minutes. And I remember, but she was crowning for a few pushes. And I was just like, I just want her out so badly. And then it's later Mike said that she blinked at him when she came out, but he was
that's the best.
Yeah, he was like under strict instructions not to touch her. So totally. She eventually kind of came out, just plopped onto the futon. And I think I kind of had a moment of like, there she is, and picked her up and then kind of sat back. Yeah. But it was just so mad, the last 20 minutes. It was just so quick, really, considering the whole rest of the time being quite long. And yeah, so that was that.
How did you know that it wasn't a complete rupture of your membranes?
Which part?
You kept saying that the water didn't properly break. How did you know that?
Well, I didn't, basically. I just trusted that everything felt fine. And I knew that as long as there was no chance of infection, that I would be fine.
I just meant when you were talking about when your first part of the waters leaked, before you were really in labor, you said like they hadn't properly opened, and I was wondering how you were able to know that.
Well, I didn't. I guess I kind of thought, I kind of thought my waters had broken, which is why I went into this dark fear place, because I was like, well, what's going on? Why is nothing happening? That's why I was freaking out, basically, because I was like, well, why am I not going into labor? So this is why I was kind of going down this rabbit hole of like, well, maybe I need to go to the hospital and blah, blah, blah. So I'm super happy that I managed to relax and go into the second part without, just basically getting over that fear and getting over my own mind. And so many women have said it, but it is that part of your mind that is the thing, isn't it? That you really have to move through that part and find your trusting self. And it is really hard to get out of that thinking brain.
Yeah, especially when you're alone,
because I had no one to reassure me or tell me that I was okay.
And it is such a sweet story that you were able to be connected to someone who's kind of been there, and even though she was a stranger, just the gift of women, that she could just tell you what you needed to hear and speak so kindly and just be like, you're in labor, and that's all you needed to hear. It made me think of, I had a wild pregnancy as well, and was very like, I'm doing this on my own, blah, blah, blah. And then my mom, around maybe 15 or so weeks, palpated my belly, and we listened. We couldn't hear much yet. We could hear the placenta, and she palpated my belly, and she went, "Yep, you're pregnant." And I burst into tears.
Oh.
And I was like, I am? Like, really? It was like just so sweet that it really, I guess I'm just relating to that sense of validation from another woman, and it is so meaningful. And this is what we need to do for each other and be available, for each other for this, because so many women are walking this path, quite lonely. And that's kind of where we're at until it's not, So, I really hear that on the kind of dark trip in the beginning. And I think that is the mind, like trying to collect evidence to pathologize, because that's all we've ever been taught. And that's what happened in your last labor. And I certainly did that after my labor got long. And I'm just so glad that you had a woman to talk to. And for anyone listening who doesn't know this, I want to make sure it's said that, leaking fluid all the way to a full, complete rupture with no significant labor is incredibly common. So I want anyone who's planning to free birth, to know that doesn't mean really anything. Now, of course, it would be different if there was, let's say, meconium and you got a fever and there was no labor after multiple days. And of course, there's extreme situations that aren't really that common. But I know many, many, many women who water's open and nothing happens for 24 to 72 hours. So that is a piece of your story that we really need to normalize, for anyone who doesn't know, because we don't see this in industrial birth, because everyone would get, augmentation very quickly. And
I think important. I think I was so worried because I hadn't heard of it that often, and I tracked back through all the kind of the videos that you guys have done in the course to like, where can I get this information? I remember like searching for it, like really trying to put my mind at rest about that, because there's not a huge amount of information out there. And but having said that, I was also really looking out for any other signs that might be I was looking out for meconium or anything like that. But because I hadn't had any of that, I knew that I just had to just trust.
Who are you now that you have free birthed? How has this changed you as a woman?
I think I kind of found a deeper power, a deeper strength through doing this. And I thought that would be really immediate. I thought that would be like, as soon as I birthed, I would feel this like amazing, empowered woman, which I did feel. But I think it's also been a really slow burner. Like, it's come out in loads of different areas of my life, and it's still coming out. And I feel like that is just only the beginning now, in a way. I feel like it's just given me the gift of, I kind of felt like through my free birth, I kind of rebirthed myself in a way, because I was so disempowered in my first birth, in a way. And this really just brought me back to myself and just showed me what I can do, basically, that showed me what I could do and what I can handle. And because I stayed really strong in my partnership, I think that's been a gift for our partnership as well, to set some boundaries about and to stand up for what I really believe in.
And to see if your relationship can really grow with that and hold that, and obviously it can. And I think that's a big part of why women don't do it and why they don't push and stand in it, is I think whether they're going to say it or not, I think they're really afraid that their marriage won't be able to hold that kind of power and that kind of growth and that kind of feminism, really. And maybe it wouldn't, I mean, I've also seen tons of relationships not be able to hold a woman growing into her power. So I appreciate your courage to do it. And I'm thrilled to hear that your marriage has been able to shift and grow. And
I think it was good for him. Yeah. I certainly think it was really good for him, because he grew a huge amount through this as well. Learning to kind of stand by your woman is pretty cool as well, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much. I love this story.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Emily.
And that's it for today, my sisters. Check out everything we do, including one-on-one and group coaching, learn about our private membership, in-person retreats, and more on freebirthsociety.com. Our online courses are on freebirthsocietycourses.com, including our flagship course, The Complete Guide to Free Birth. Don't miss the Radical Birthkeeper School if you're ready to become the authentic midwife that women are searching for. Together we rise, and the revolution starts inside each of us. Our opening song is by Shyla Ray. And now, I'll leave you with our Freebirth Society theme song, Wild Woman by Aruba Red.
I honor you for the wisdom you held, the ancient traditions of plant medicine and womb magic. I feel the spirit of the ancestors as I place my hands upon my belly. This sacred portal will be honored. Eons upon light beams of survival, withstanding the eradication of our power by design. I will not allow the separation of our young to be forced upon me. My sisters will no longer birth in captivity. The picket line redefined from burning our wild women to paralyzing us and drugging our babes. Strapped down in a clinical white bed, drying up the milk from our breasts, keep your needles. My family will never again be doomed to chase those dragons or your poison. We reject your fear. We choose love. Everything with intention. Death, ascension. I will fly and bring her back from the stars.